She Follows Me. Original post by me, Grimm reads. She follows me. Let's get started. Hello everyone. I really don't know how I'm supposed to start these sort of things, but I guess I better start by introducing myself. My name is Adam. I'm 21 years old, and I truly don't think I will be seeing 22. How come? Well, let me start at the beginning. Ever since I was a child, I've been seeing someone following me. A woman in full white with black hair. She never seemed to move closer, always staying at a distance. Even when I was inside, that feeling of being watched, ever present. The first time I remember seeing her, I was 5. My mother, father, and I were on a trip to see my grandparents. We had been on the road for what, to my child's mind, felt like had been an eternity. It was starting to get dark, and I remember myself slowly starting to doze off. Fall asleep for those who speak proper English. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by both my mother and father's screaming. They were horrible, piercing screams. I managed to let out a cry just as the car flipped. Then, everything went black. I remember coming to. I was upside down and I could feel the blood rushing to my head. With a weakened voice, I called for my mother, to which I got no response. I started to cry, looking around for anyone who could hear me. As I looked around, I was suddenly face to face with a woman who stared into what felt like my soul. Her eyes were black, sunken holes, that while you couldn't see her eyes, you could feel them gazing upon you. Her skin was so white. It was as white as the fresh snow that covers the ground on the first day of winter. And her hair was so black, it seemed to be sucking the color out of the things surrounding her. But the feature that scared me the most, however, was her big, toothy grin. It was so large that it seemed to be much wider than her natural face. It was stretched out as though it was a rubber band being pulled to its limits. As I stared in shock, I heard her start to whisper, "You're not ready yet." Her voice seemed to be like a mixture of multiple voices and accents, all speaking in unison with each other. As she finished speaking, the world went black again. I remember groggily opening my eyes to a white ceiling above me. I slowly sat up with light tears in my eyes. I looked around. The first thing I noticed was that I was in a large white bed, sat next to a window that seemed to take up a whole wall. On the wall directly in front of me, there was another large white bed, mirroring the one that I was in. The wall was covered in wires, machines, and stickers. I was in the hospital. Continuing to look around, I saw my grandmother sitting next to me with tears in her eyes. The second she noticed that I started to stir, I heard her call for the nurses. With my eyes still foggy, I looked out the window into the park below, and that's when I saw the woman again. She stood what felt like miles away, just standing there, facing my direction. I felt her eyes fixed to me, as though she could see me perfectly, even though to me, she was just a blur. Still exhausted from the whole ordeal, I leaned back into the bed and fell asleep. Unfortunately, I lost both of my parents in that crash. Afterwards, I had to start living with my grandparents, which I didn't mind. I mean, I truly loved my grandparents. As you could expect, the whole ordeal was a lot for a little mind to comprehend. So, I was put through years of counseling. Counselor after counselor, shrink after shrink. I was observed, tested, and comforted. They told me that the white woman with black hair was just a guilt-driven hallucination caused from the survivor guilt I most definitely felt. I could not understand why I saw her everywhere. Even with the meds and therapy, she never disappeared. Always staring. Always standing at the same distance, never moving closer. My life slowly moved forward, and other than the woman, my life started to become what some would consider to be rather normal. I grew up, I made friends, did well in school. You know, normal. I was even tricked by my teacher to get into basketball. It's no surprise, as by the time I was 16, I stood at almost 6 feet tall. I was rather slender, and I was one of the tallest of my class. That is probably the reason why my PE teacher was so keen to see me in basketball. Now I know I used the word tricked, but really I did enjoy the sport. It was good, as most of the basketball courts in my neighborhood were indoors, so it was a peaceful break from seeing the woman. Although, while I could always feel her gaze, the building's walls were enough to hide her from my vision. I'll do that one again. I know I used the word trick, but I really did enjoy the sport. It was good, as most basketball courts in my neighborhood were indoors, so it was a peaceful break from seeing the woman. While I could always feel her gaze, the building's walls were enough to hide her from my vision, give me some peace. The years continued to pass, and basketball continued to be my only escape from her. the only time I was free from having her in my vision. Unfortunately, these moments only lasted for 2 years. As on my 18th birthday, things changed. I was in my bedroom watching some YouTube videos, some highlights of some of my favorite basketball games, cat videos, etc. When suddenly, I thought I heard whispering. At the start, it was unintelligible. Couldn't make out any words at all. But, as you probably guess, it got worse. Day by day, the words becoming clearer and clearer. And each time I got a new word, I became more and more frightened. The whispering never stopped. Hour after hour, day after day, and night after night. I heard them everywhere I went. Nowhere was safe. I felt like I was going insane. I couldn't understand how no one could hear it. Why it was only me. I remember one day, I was just so tired and drained that the whispering just got to me so badly that I snapped and screamed at the top of my lungs in the middle of class, "Shut up! Shut up!" After my outburst, I stopped and looked around the classroom. Everyone's eyes were on me. You could see they were judging me. Even my fucking teacher looked at me like I was insane. Who the fuck was he to talk? Dressing like a fucking hippie from the 60s, reeking of pot. Who the fuck did he think he was? Shit. I'm sorry. I lost myself there. It seems every time I relive that day, I break a little. I mean, it was the day everything got worse for me after all. From that day, people started to distance themselves from me. My best friends, classmates, even my entire basketball team. I became alone. I dropped out of basketball. I stopped going to class. Just disappeared into my own despair. Understandably, my grandparents started to worry about me. They could see from my appearance that I was unraveling. They couldn't handle the fact I was spending days at a time awake, only sleeping when I finally passed out from exhaustion. So, they did what anyone else would do. They felt the only thing they could do is get me help. This was in the form of institutionalizing me. I was carted away to Cherry Farm, one of the biggest mental institutes in the South Island. Not that I'm sad about it, as it was there that I met her, the girl who would truly help me. Her name was Susan. I think I'll leave this here. Now, I'll hopefully return later this coming week to continue where I left off. So, wait for me, if you can. God bless you. God bless you all. Hey. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more videos. Have a good night.